See how this works. Alrighty, hello everyone. I'm Turnstile with the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy. Thank you all for joining us today for our first installment in a new series we started called Behind the Creative. Here we invite successful and inspiring creatives and creative entrepreneurs to share their stories and the lessons they've learned along the way. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy is a platform that empowers creative entrepreneurs like yourself to build sustainable businesses around your art. We achieve this through our 3 pillars that include mentoring, training, and community. Since launching our platform globally this year, we were recently honored by Fast Company for their 2021 World Changing Ideas list. You can visit parsonsentrepreneur.com to learn more about our 3 offerings. Today, we were thrilled to be joined by Dewey Bryan Saunders, a graphic designer, creative director, and highly celebrated artist who you may know for his work with artists such as Anderson Paak, Future, Chronix, and brands like Ray-Ban, Urban Outfitters, and Vans. He's also ventured off to start his own clothing line, High Comfort, which you can see on his Instagram. We'll have a 35 to 40-minute chat time before opening up for Q&A with our audience. And on that note, please welcome today's guest, Dewey Bryan Saunders.
Cool.
Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. Doing great. Just living the creative dream out here in Los Angeles.
Amazing. All right, let's get into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So where you're from, how you started in your, design, your creative journey.
Yeah. So originally I'm from South Florida, and I moved up to outside of the Philadelphia area when I was around 10 years old. So definitely have like a strong East Coast influence behind my work. I come from a very creative family, but I would say my current art obsession probably stems from my teenage years skateboarding and watching skateboarding videos, reading all the skateboarding magazines, and just being obsessed with the graphics. I would tear out the pages from the magazines and kind of post them up all over my room and just decorate. Before I even knew what graphic design really was, I knew I kind of had the eye for it and was interested in graphics and just art in general. But as a kid, I was exposed to art at an early age, which definitely has played an influence in my development. I was lucky enough to go to a lot of museums in New York and even Italy when I was 7, 8 years old, and just was dragged to all the museums and ended up loving it. And as a little kid, I was obsessed with Henri Matisse and René Magritte and all the classic painters and Pablo Picasso. And yeah, I've just always been surrounded by art and kind of found my own entrance into it through the world of graphic design as a teenager.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, those are some really awesome fine art prints. I have some as well on my wall. That's awesome. So what would you, when did you start kind of the collaging? How did you kind of get into that? Because, you've obviously built your own style that no one else has kind of mirrored, and it's very special and unique to you. So how did that kind of come about? When did you start doing that? And how did you kind of build this kind of, collaging empire?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I was in college for graphic design, I was more of an illustrator. So I would illustrate portraits in pen and ink and do a lot of watercolor paintings and just a lot of drawings in general. That was my thing. And then as time went on, I would find myself kind of collaging in my sketchbook over drawings I wasn't really feeling or things that were unsuccessful, and I didn't want to waste the paper. So I would just kind of make a mixed media experiment out of it. And over time, I started to become really drawn to those experiments. Instead of covering up drawings I didn't like, I just started making collages on my own, and it became a really effective and quick way to do image making and image creation without really needing too much material besides a magazine, a pair of scissors, and some glue. So that was really really exciting for me to be able to make a lot of images very quickly instead of painstakingly drawing out these like pen and ink portraits that would take me hours and hours. And then, you know, you'd mess them up sometimes, and it's not like you can just go back. It's not Photoshop. So that kind of way of working was very unforgiving. And I found collage and mixed media to be just more fluid and more about like using like photography that was like punchy and creating visuals that were like kind of more energetic and more bold.
Amazing. I love that. And so like growing up, like in terms of art and in terms of like music, what are, you know, who or what are some of like your kind of biggest influences in kind of shaping and molding your kind of style and art form?
Yeah, well, I think I come from like a hip hop background primarily, growing up in Philadelphia and just being around a lot of music, just the whole scene that I was involved with. I was steeped in with a lot of people from the Roots crew, a lot of producers around me, a lot of rappers and bands, and that was just the world that I came from. So I just kind of picked up doing album artwork for people that I was friends with and that were doing, you know, had like a local buzz and were putting out like serious albums for that time. So around like 2010, 2011, I started getting more serious with using my collage in album work, and like album artwork being the main vessel and the main output. It just became like the perfect format for me because I wanted to be involved in the music industry and I wanted to do artwork. So I just really started like handling all the creative direction for my friends' releases and doing flyers and album covers and merch, and really just like kind of pushing the visuals and the music space.
Amazing. So I see you have some of your kind of artwork in the back as well. You've done work with Future and Anderson Paak, as we previously mentioned. So how do you go about, you know, like connecting with and working with, you know, these artists and different like kind of larger clients? And do you have any kind of tips on networking and, you know, building your brand and your business?
Totally. Now, this is a really good question and probably something that a lot of people that follow me want to know about. And I definitely have some insights and some stories to tell, but I think that everybody's path is different. And at the end of the day, it's kind of up to you to like decide how to go about it. But for me, I always viewed networking as more like making friends and making connections that I want with people that I wanted to work with. It was never really about exchanging business cards. It was more about actually creating and maintaining relationships with future clients. So it's funny, the way that I connected with Anderson Paak, for instance, was through Twitter. And this was probably back in 2013, but I had initiated a series, a personal series that I wanted to do for my portfolio called Pro Rap. And basically I went back to illustration and I started drawing portraits of rappers that I really liked. And I did a few that made it to the rappers like Instagrams. Mac Miller was one of the first people to repost me. Rest in peace. He really put a lot of people on, and I
love Mac.
So yeah, that was my first taste of kind of having contact with somebody that I was listening to and that I wanted to do artwork for. So that kind of snowballed into a bigger project where I was just doing drawings of Kendrick, of Isaiah Rashad, of anybody that I was listening to at the time. And really it was just like a way for me to get my work seen in a world that it was so hard to get your work in front of these artists. So
totally.
I was like, you know, how do I get eyes on my work? I knew it was good and I knew that people would like it if they saw it, but it's just the trouble of how to get the work in front of them. Mm-hmm. And basically the portrait series I did was the perfect tool because everybody loves drawings of themselves. It's just a universal thing. It's flattering, especially if you make it dope. People are definitely gonna want to repost it. So it really became like my best trick because I was like fishing for people that I wanted to work with, and they would see their portrait and like click into my profile and then see all the other work that I had done, which was mostly like collage work and not even illustration, but it was the perfect way to get attention. And yeah, one day Anderson hit me up on Twitter and he was like, "Where's my portrait? Where's my cartoon?" And yeah, that was a wrap. We just started working together since then. And I remember I did a portrait of him. He loved it, and we ran it on a flyer and a poster for his series, like even before the album Venice came out. So that was the beginning of our relationship, and we became, you know, working friends and ended up working throughout the years until Malibu came around, and I was the right artist to do the cover when it was time.
That's amazing. Yeah, definitely one of my favorite covers for sure of all Anderson Paak's albums. And I see that you still do like the collages for like different artists and different celebrities these days too. And you kind of just, yeah, it's awesome to see you continue to kind of expand and grow your art and continue to just practice. I think that's a huge thing as well about being a creative, is just to continue to figure out how you can A, disseminate your art more, and B, kind of change the way in which you're working. And I see you continuously doing that, which is awesome. So out of all the things you've done in your career, what is kind of your favorite accomplishment?
Well, I have to say Malibu is definitely a landmark milestone as far as my career, and a kind of clear distinction of where my career really took off. I owe a lot to Anderson because we were able to do a whole campaign for him and really just kind of create a world that almost created my current style in a way too. So basically that was kind of the beginning of everything for me. Obviously the Future cover was huge to me, especially as a Future fan. That was probably the first time I worked with an artist on that scale. And I was actually able to be involved in the project from the ground floor. I was there for the photo shoot. I was there since day one, working with the creative directors and photographers. And yeah, I watched them get styled in the wood set that we built, you know, on set. And yeah, it was just kind of a wild thing to see, you know, the billboards in Times Square and all over the world. And the album was released in conjunction with his documentary of the same title. So it was just a pretty big moment for me. And it was also very affirming for somebody that just moved to Los Angeles in hopes to expand his business practice and the clients. So it was just like, it was just a big like high five from the universe in a way. And also it was with the Philly team. My guy, Spike Jordan, kind of got me in on that project. And he is somebody that I worked with for Lil Uzi Vert and Meek Mill in the past. So that just goes to show you kind of about the networking thing too. I really just like to make creative friends and keep those relationships and always check up on them. And whether it's about a collaboration or not, just being excited about other people's work and being interested in other people's projects and what they have going on.
Amazing. I love that. So it's clear that you have an amazing kind of body of people around you, whether that's friends or your network or the people that you work with. But my question is, do you have a mentor that kind of helps you, you know, with all your work, or gives you advice on, you know, whenever you're struggling with anything? Do you have someone that does that?
Well, I don't know if I have just one particular mentor. I think life's kind of funny like that. You kind of get teachers when you are ready for them. But my creative director during the Malibu campaign has become a mentor figure for me and a friend, and just like a OG that, you know, has really good ideas and insight and is kind of involved in, you know, the general direction of my career and just basically championing what I do. But yeah, Corey Gomberg was the creative director for Malibu, and I worked in conjunction with him, kind of redefining my collage style into something very tight and narrative driven. And yeah, we created everything together for the Malibu campaign, and it was really just a lot of teamwork, and we've continued to work together since then. When I did the Ray-Ban campaign for the holiday 2017 rollout, he was also my like creative director for that project too. So it just helps to have a little bit of direction from people that have been in the industry for a long time. And his experience working at the Source magazine in the mid 90s to high fashion in the early 2000s really has like benefited me just by hearing his stories and kind of like learn what to do in the graphic design and fashion space. So yeah, like he's definitely been a mentor, and a lot of my like younger friends are almost mentors in ways as well, because I just learned so much from everybody around me that, you know, anybody can be a teacher if you're paying attention.
Totally. What are some kind of like the, key lessons that you've learned from some of these people?
I think the key lesson is really that I'm doing good work and continue redefining what that is, and to bring people into my world even more, and to just keep decorating my internal world and bring more people into it. It's really just been a lot of positive feedback and support from my network, and really it's good to have that, you know what I mean? It's like every little victory gets to be shared with other people, and I feel like the people that are riding with me for so long, like we're kind of all in it together in a way.
Amazing. I love that. So what made you kind of decide to follow a creative career choice, which, as we all know, is pretty risky, rather than doing something more stable, something, more 9 to 5?
Yeah, well, after school, I was always doing freelance. So whether that be illustration work or the album covers, it was always just my MO to be kind of my own boss. So even though I could have probably worked at a graphic design studio and kind of had like a safer trail, I think doing the really creative projects that I've been doing over the years has allowed me to like be not only a graphic designer, but I've also become an artist in my own right. So, instead of being like the invisible person behind a project, a lot of brands are kind of approaching me to do a partnership with me as the artist. And that's been pretty cool, and always something that I've wanted to push towards is like the fine art thing. So not only am I a graphic designer, I'm also a fine artist, like a gallery artist as well. And I feel like I'm kind of operating in like the gray area of the two worlds.
Amazing. So kind of, in the creative journey, like what are some of the hardest things you face or have faced in your creative journey?
Um, Creative work is really difficult sometimes because it's so subjective. And I think one of the best skills as a freelancer is to learn how to pitch and explain your project or your visual solution. I used to kind of send off like rounds of visuals without much explanation because I thought the visuals kind of said everything. But I really think when you provide a little bit of a backstory and a reason for your choices, and you learn how to sell your work, it really improves client relationships, and you can kind of like meet creatively a little bit clearer. I think that freelancing can be hard when you're not really sure on a creative direction. So in my process with working with clients, I've kind of like streamlined that. So we're talking about the same thing right away. Instead of trying 5 different styles and seeing what lands, I really try to figure out what the problem is and figure out the solution with one visual instead of giving them 20 things to pick from. Because at the end of the day, I know what's the best out of the 20, and I'd rather just pitch the strongest thing and have reasons why it's like the best option.
Amazing. And what do you think are some of the things that clients look for when they're hiring like a designer or creative director, just for all of our aspiring designers on this conversation?
Yeah, well, it's funny because style is a tricky thing, but I think art directors are looking for almost like a predictable style that they know what they're going to get when they hire you. Which is funny because I really encourage people to experiment, but it really makes sense to have a singular voice when working in the commercial art space instead of having this is something that I battled with for so long. I had an illustration portfolio and like a collage, like album art portfolio. And I realized that they were kind of like battling each other, and I wanted to pick one direction. So I think figuring out your style is really important. And it should be a personal like journey that you arrive at, instead of like picking a style that you see someone else doing and then want to copy that. Um, Really developing your voice as an artist and as a designer, and honing in on those decisions that you make, and knowing like what your aesthetic is and style is, and then you can push it from there. But I think like learning who you are and what you make is really important.
Totally. Do you have any kind of advice for people who are trying to find that style? Like, how do they go about finding what they are best at and what they want to be doing?
Yeah, well, I think like in a lot of cases, it's kind of like turning up the good stuff and turning down the bad stuff, and just experimenting and seeing what excites you as as an artist. But I've made countless of pieces that were unsuccessful because I was experimenting, and I knew that through the act of just like working through different techniques and different ways to do things is pretty much the only way to arrive at your style. So I made a mountain of artwork that's not great, but I had to do it to get to where I am. And really it's about kind of getting inspired by certain things that aren't necessarily like your contemporary network, and turning whatever you're inspired by and what's deep inside you into your art. And I feel like a lot of the times it's good to put your blinders on, because we are surrounded by dope artists. And I look on Instagram on the explore page, I'm like, oh man, there's all these cool styles, you know what I mean? But it doesn't make sense for me to do something that's like not within my ability or interest. And yeah, it's like, it's really a little bit ephemeral, but it's kind of like an inner journey, and kind of like, trying to match what you have going on in your head with the image on the paper on the computer screen, and constantly reinventing that and trying to achieve that vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about, seeing other people's work as well, and the kind of zeitgeist of the internet and in this like creative space. So on that note, like, how do you deal with like rejection? How do you stop it from, affecting your creative process? Because I know that we're, especially on Twitter and Instagram, we're surrounded by incredible creatives. We continue to kind of push the envelope on, how art is being created. So how do you deal with kind of rejection? And yeah.
Yeah, well, I would like to say that rejection or like projects that don't go through don't affect me, but at the end of the day, I'm only human, and you got to feel what you feel at first, and then maybe use the rejection as a way to like put the spotlight on some of your weaknesses, and realize what are the things that you could have done better. And I focus on making my product undeniably dope, and that is like my main motto. So usually when I do that, everything ends up okay, but sometimes the client doesn't agree, and you gotta chalk it up, because art is subjective, and it's tricky when you're working with a client you're working for them, you know what I mean? So you have to answer the assignment, answer the problem in the best way you can. And sometimes, it doesn't work out, but you can use that experience as a learning experience. And I feel like during my career, I've done almost everything wrong, but now because I've learned from those instances, I'm starting to be a little bit more mindful on how to approach negotiation, and kind of how to convince clients about like work that I'm pitching. At the end of the day, it's really about clear communication And I think that a lot of the rejection might come from like kind of a miscommunication from the beginning. So I think that the first steps in a project are the most important, because you're really agreeing on the visual solution and what it looks like. So if you start off on that foot, you usually are better off. But rejection is part of the game, and life is more than graphic design as well. So it helps to go for a walk or go into nature and do other stuff than be on the computer. For me, I'm a big like literature book guy, as you can tell by the bookshelf in the back, and that's a big stress reliever for me. So it's just about kind of like handling it in the best way. And in this day and age, it's like we're all faced with comparing and looking at other people that are doing better than you, but it's really just about competing with yourself. And I think it's important to just try to beat your own high score.
Totally. I love that. Those are some really great points. And circling back to something that you said earlier on, but like, what are some things you kind of wish you knew sooner before you started your creative journey?
Yeah, well, I think it's just things you learn along the way. But as far as like trying to get work, I think I was trying to contact the artists a lot about working, and in retrospect, it's really hard to like reach an artist and get them to agree to work with you. So it's best to be in communication with their team and their management, and whatever homie they listen to the most, like kind of work with them instead of directly with the artist. Sometimes I think that's a helpful thing. A lot of people are reaching out to like Future or Drake, and it's really just about finding out who's on the team that will be the decision maker. I also think that when starting out, you forget how long this path can be, and that you'll like see the same people over and over again. So it really helps to just maintain integrity and do kind of like have fair prices that are raised in every year in a way that makes sense, and just kind of like do things officially and operate as a business. Art can be very like emotional sometimes, and we're really tied into it personally, but when you're operating as a business, it's you have to be like less emotional, and you just have to be a little bit more like clear and not like disengaged. But it also helps to have a manager. So that's one thing
Totally.
over the years, is you don't have to do it all yourself, especially when you start getting a lot of work. And one thing that's helped my practice is having my manager, John Wingfield, represent me. And it creates a real sense of like support and professionality, and also kind of takes the pressure off of negotiation and accounting.
Amazing. And how did you go about finding a manager?
I was friends with people on Twitter that were getting managed by him as well. And it just made sense. Like, it was kind of a long time in the works, and I had been running my own show for a really long time. And I just wanted to focus on creative and focus on, image making and doing the fun stuff.
Totally. That's awesome. Yeah. Do you have any tips for people who are kind of looking for, management or an agent, what they can kind of prepare, how they go about finding one?
Yeah, I think it just makes sense to think about where you are in the journey of an artist or a designer or creative, and think about if you can do it yourself, and if not, what you would want in a manager or management position. I think that for my case, it was just really, really helpful to take some of the workload off. And I wasn't ready for it until I was. So I think that a lot of people might want that, but it makes sense to do it when you have like a high demand and, you know, when the time is right. But I recommend people having kind of a vision of where they want their business to be in, you know, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years, and kind of thinking about the long game like that a little bit more, and how you can, you know, build a relationship with a manager that has similar ideals and that wants that and brings new ideas to the table to push your work too. So that's really what I enjoy about working with John, is that he is always thinking of new ways to kind of push my art into new spaces. And yeah, I think it's important to have that kind of creative support, to always be kind of like brainstorming. So for anybody looking for that, I would just really think about where you want to be and what you would want them to do for you.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great advice. You know, especially when we're talking about, you know, finding a management and finding clients, obviously a good portfolio is really important and all of that. What would you say are kind of the important parts of building a good or great portfolio? And, you know, what are the kind of elements that people should be adding and thinking about in order to build that?
Great question. And I think that a portfolio should be, you know, 10 to 20 of your strongest pieces. You know, my teachers would always say that you're only as good as the weakest project in your portfolio. So I think you should, you know, look at your portfolio and take out anything that is not top shelf and top of the line. Also, I think that people want to see the ability to work in a series and to carry out an idea into multiple applications. So whether that be a project that has a few different single covers and an album cover with a tour poster and some merch that all ties together, I think it's important for people to see that you can do a whole package and you're not just doing one-off designs, and that you can break down your design, your logos, and the whole aesthetic and repurpose it into different applications. I think that there needs to be a strong conceptual edge in a lot of the portfolio pieces. You know, it's great if it looks nice, but it should also mean something incredibly deep, or at least have a why and a reason behind it. Yeah, and I think that, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about the portfolio, and that's what gets you through the door. So just constant refining. And if you have pieces that you like that could be better, redo it. It's never too late to repackage a piece or to reinvent or to rethink a concept. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like to really kind of develop the, you know, the personal style we were just talking about, and to have a range of work that all has the undercurrent of your voice as a designer.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, definitely purpose behind your work is really important. How important do you think it is to show kind of the process? Like, do clients look for that often in terms of like how you went from A to Z?
Yeah, no, I think that it's something that I've been getting better at, is to bring people into my thought process instead of just arriving at the finished product and showing them. People really like being in on the conceptual floor and the groundwork of the project. So I think that as a designer, writing and communicating are really important skills to have. And you have to be able to talk about visuals in a way that makes sense, and to even have like a vernacular to explain the concepts, and be able to talk about composition and color and just, you know, general aesthetic and vibe. And yeah, I think that, you know, design is more, it's more than just visuals. It's about being an intelligent person and knowing what's going on in the world, and kind of having all the references, you know, come through, and being able to explain why you're doing something.
Totally. And, you know, obviously being a great creative is one thing, and How would you say that creatives can become better communicators of their artwork, and how can they, I feel like being able to talk about your artwork and talk about yourself and just communicate with clients is such a huge thing. What are some other kind of important things that graphic designers, like the skills that designers should learn and should know in order to continue to grow their business?
I think the biggest thing for me, especially when I'm pretty heavily booked, is about project management and how to successfully juggle multiple projects that are almost like different headspaces in the same week or in the same period. And there's a few different like programs you can use to do project management, but whatever way works for you is fine. Like, I don't think it needs to be a specific program, but I think that knowing how long it takes you to do things is really important, and being realistic about that. I always like to do, I work pretty fast, but I also like to give myself plenty of time, like just in case I want to rework through things. So being very realistic about your process and knowing how to break down your process into different stages is really important too. So it's not just like the thumbnail to the finish. It's knowing that you do a rough draft, and then, the version after that is called the first finish to me. No, actually it goes work in progress to first finish to finish. And then I go through a final stage, which is like just, mixing and mastering the final artwork. But it really helps to know how you work and how you can explain that process to a client.
Amazing. So I love that creative process, when you're working with a client. So what's the kind of creative process leading up to that in terms of like the research? What does that look like for you? How do you, once you get a brief from a client and they have their asks, how do you develop that into kind of the finished product?
That's a really good question. And I think that depending on the project, it really determines how I'm going to go about it. Sometimes I'll get a very specific brief from a client. Sometimes I'll just get like a mood board for a kind of a vibe. But my first step is usually taking a whole step back. And instead of diving into the specifics of the project, I like to take a step back and to just flip through some books, kind of get inspired and be like thinking about the brief, but also not being married to any idea right away. And I think that's a really important stage. And that's the same stage as sketching. So it's really about kind of like, and none of the sketches or thumbnails like look good, but it's really an important process, I think, for designers and artists to start with a pencil and paper before they get to the computer, because the computer is almost like, it's just like a light bright. Like it doesn't make ideas. You don't get ideas from the computer. Like this is where the ideas come from. And I think it makes sense to give yourself a little time to develop just some like really loose concepts. And I'll just flip through magazines. I'll listen to music. I'll go to like a museum, and really it's just about getting inspired and then getting into the nitty gritty of the project, like after the initial like sketch phase.
Awesome. And where do you kind of source inspiration for kind of like your mood boards and, whenever you're developing work and kind of pulling kind of different concepts from, or inspiration, like where do you find those kind of pieces?
Well, I am just a huge collector of books and like vintage magazines, all kind of printed matter from like any time period. So for me, I like to flip through old magazines, really, because there's so many fonts and like cool pictures and design elements that really like give me a lot of ideas. And I think that, a lot of design from these vintage magazines is really strong design. And I get really inspired by just the 40s and 50s leading up to like the 70s, like flipping through National Geographics, Life magazines, art books about painters, and even like old Playboy magazines. They have like great advertisements and like hilarious illustrations, and those are the kind of things that I look for to get my wheels turning. I'm flipping through books and magazines and tearing pages out that I like and scanning them and really just like amassing a huge archive of printed matter that I'm scanning in, whether it's for like collage work or just for reference. But I have like a whole library of images I can just kind of click and flow through. And it's probably like, 20,000 images that I've scanned over the past like 5 years that create like a data bank of like my pool and like where I'm pulling stuff from. And I'm always adding to it.
That's incredible dedication. I love that so much. I see you have a very impressive collection in the back of different books. So what are some of your kind of favorite books that you constantly flip through and that you go through?
Yeah, so let's see here. This is a really awesome book by Karita Kent. She was a nun actually who did very experimental typography, and you might like recognize some of this stuff, but these are the kind of art books that I look to for like inspiration, and really the inspiration is everywhere. My grandmother used to have her prints in her house, so I was looking at these prints for years since I was a little kid. And then it's funny, like once you start getting into art, you realize that you've been surrounded by these pictures forever. But yeah, this is the stuff that does it for me. It's like going through these artists that I really admire. That was Karita Kent, just to remind you. John Baldessari, just like really kind of looking at recent artists that aren't like our contemporaries is important to me. I think that like scrolling through Instagram is kind of like a creativity killer, and I'd rather like study some of the masters and like go through like art history.
I love that. That's awesome. There was something that you touched on earlier about your emotions and art, and how they sometimes, as a creative, like our work becomes so intrinsically part of us. So how do you separate your art from your emotions?
Well, I wish you could, but unfortunately it's just intrinsically tied in. But you do have to realize that your work isn't you, and that if somebody is critiquing your work, it's not anything personal. It's literally about that piece of artwork that is very subjective. I think that going to art school and at Tyler really like toughened me up a little bit when it comes to criticism and critique, because I'd put up a new illustration and it would get torn apart by the entire class, and you have to like, you can take it in stride and also use those things to get better and use those things to fuel you. So there's no way to separate the emotion. I think the emotion is important. If you didn't feel passionate about your work, I don't know if it's really for you to do like a super creative field. But I think that just not taking things personally is one of the biggest tools you can use as a designer.
Amazing. Awesome. So we have a couple more questions before we go on to our Q&A. I love this question, but what motivates or interests you to keep going?
Wow. Well, I feel so far away from where I want to be. And it's funny because people look at what I've accomplished, and it is a lot in a certain sense. But for me, I am very ambitious. So what fuels me is those ambitious visions of the future, and how do I get there, and how do I impact the most people? How do I create artwork that inspires even more people? How do I activate the inner creative in everybody around me? And there's a lot of ideas and plans always in the works, but yeah, I think just the excitement of making dope visuals is really what fuels me, and to just refine that and distill it and make my style even even more like visually dazzling and conceptually strong and more universal so that it resonates with even more people.
Amazing. And last question is, what are you looking forward to doing next? Whether that's in your own work, whether that's, with your brand, High Comfort, like what are some things that you'd like to be doing in the near future?
Yeah, well, I definitely am pushing High Comfort as far as I can. So that's really been a fun project for me. We're actually releasing a new collection tomorrow, the fall collection. And it's just been a huge passion for me to combine my interest in fashion with what I do with the graphic design and just creative rollouts and creative direction and photography and kind of like brand building. It's just been really fun as a vehicle for me to try out creative things that aren't really client based. So that's really the project I'm pushing the most right now.
Amazing. I'm very excited to see that drop. I will definitely be checking out tomorrow. Alrighty, we're going to move on to our Q&A questions. And I can see that there are already a few in the chat. So we're going to go straight into it. So the first question is, you're a successful creative. How much of your day is spent being creative versus taking care of business, admin stuff, expenses, customer relationships, etc.?
That's a really good question and super, super relevant. I think that I've really broken my week down into different phases. So I'll focus on creative stuff like Wednesday through Saturday. And then on Monday and Tuesday, I'll do more administrative work and I'll get my accounts in order and I'll do accounting and client management and maintaining the relationships. And then I'll use a chunk later in the week to really dive in creatively. And that's really helped me because in the past I would try to do kind of like emails and stuff and then jump to creative. And I realized that I work better in creative streaks, like 2 to 4 day streaks where I'm getting all my creative work done. And that allows me to have a couple of days in the beginning of the week where I'm just organizing and getting things in order.
Amazing. All right, next question. How did you handle structuring your prices and navigating what you were worth over the course of your career?
Wow, that's a really good question. Well, you have to just do what people will pay for at first and scale up slowly from there. I think that it's important to be transparent as designers. You don't have to post your rates online, but it helps to ask other people what they're charging. And I've always been pretty open about sending my rate sheets to other people so they can see what kind of level I'm operating on. And it's really about realizing your value and realizing how much that's worth and then doubling that that number. It's hard to charge a lot of money for visuals when you're not valuing your work like strong enough. So when you see the value of your work and you know what you bring to a project, that's where you can charge a good rate. And you have to kind of like work backwards. You have to reverse engineer it. It's like, how much time is this going to take me? How much do I want to get paid hourly or just like daily? That really helps. But, over time, when you have, other peers kind of sharing their pricing structures, and then when you have management kind of getting involved, it just becomes clear what you're offering to the client and how valuable that is.
Amazing. All right. Next question is, how do you motivate yourself when you hit a creative lull or aren't fully satisfied with what you're creating at the moment?
Wow, that's a really good question. The creative block is very normal. We're not always going to be creative, and I think it makes sense to just kind of give yourself a little bit of a break. I mean, it's hard to do that when you're on a deadline, but if you can get inspiration from just life instead of going through, your computer or the internet or Instagram or anything like that. I think it's really important that we just get out of our studios. And for me, exercise has been a really big game changer because I have a lot of energy that needs to be like directed somewhere. So if I'm not like feeling the work, it's usually because I'm not like feeling great myself. And it helps if I just take a step back and do a little bit of self-care, whether that's rest or exercise or eating really good, getting a fresh juice, kind of just taking a step back, breathing, reading an article, and then just feeling good, feeling better about the process, and then getting back to the work when you're feeling a bit more refreshed.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely all of those things are important to living a really good, balanced, creative lifestyle.
Yeah.
Someone asked, did you make the shirt that you're wearing?
Yeah, I did. This is the new high comfort drop. This is the coral garment dyed t-shirt.
Amazing. Do you happen to have anything else around you that you can kind of tease, or is that just the thing that we're hearing?
Was just delivered to my warehouse yesterday. So if you
Gotcha.
follow the High Comfort Instagram, which is high_comfort, you can see a sneak peek and await the drop tomorrow at noon PST.
Amazing. Make sure you all lock that in. Next question. Is there anything you're currently obsessed with?
Yeah. Let's see. What am I obsessed with? I'm always obsessed with collage work. I think that it comes in waves, but I'm working on a new exhibition for October, and I've really been making like larger collage pieces. So I have a renewed obsession with collage again, where I'm cutting out as much stuff as possible and just kind of going in. This is a bin of my new clippings, and it really is kind of 200 to 300 pieces where these are all going to end up in new artworks. So really, like, the obsession is going through these magazines and finding really visually stunning pictures and cutting them out and reassembling them, and kind of like redefining what collage means to me and how I can push the art form in an exciting way for somebody that's been doing it for a long time.
Amazing. Next question. What musicians are on your bucket list that you want to work with?
Oh man, that's a good one. Definitely want to work with Smino on something, whether it's album artwork or merch. Same thing with SZA. I think it'd be incredible to work with somebody like that. Big fan. I'm just a music enthusiast at the end of the day, so I'm really just a fan of a lot of the people that I get to work with. But Kendrick Lamar is on the bucket list for sure. Yeah, I think Flying Lotus would be a really cool client to have. I've been listening since 1983, his like first record, and yeah, I feel like our styles would mesh, and just like I would love to do some insane collage work for Flylo.
Yeah, totally. He has really insane music videos too. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen them, but like they're incredible, for sure. Next question, similar to this one, but I would definitely ask this. Do you have any dream collaborators? So maybe that's brands, such.
Yeah. I definitely want to work with Nike on something, whether it's a campaign, a lookbook, advertisement, or even like a custom shoe. When, I'm at that level, I think that's just almost every designer's bucket list client. I think it'd be cool to work with Apple on something. Really love the brand Brain Dead. I'd love to collaborate with Brain Dead on some merch through High Comfort or just through me as an artist. Yeah, those are some top ones for sure, and definitely would rock with Adidas too. Like, whoever wants to holler at me, I'm ready.
I love that. I would honestly love to see one of those Apple like episodes made on you. I know they've been done for so many different artists across the globe, but like I'd love to see one of those for you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Totally. Next question. Are there any other current graphic designers you're into?
Oh, totally. The question is like, where do I begin and where do I stop? There's a collage artist that I really like, Nick Supa. He is a younger artist that's doing really great collage graphic design work. Um, let's see, as far as favorite graphic designers, there's this guy, James Ronco, that I really like. I think he lives in Spain. His work is insane. There's this homie from Philly who's doing really exciting work named James Paris. And I really look for people that are doing something different. So I'm a big fan of so many different designers, but my favorites are people that are kind of like doing more like left field stuff. So yeah, those are three: Nick Supa, James Ronco, and James Paris.
Amazing. We do have a couple more questions. What tools do you use to design?
Usually I start with the analog process, which is like cutting out found imagery, scanning textures, taking my own photos. And then Photoshop is my primary Adobe program that kind of I assemble everything in or just do some like finishing work in. But yeah, I'm like just deep in the Photoshop when it comes to client work. And then for like fine art work or personal work, nothing really touches the computer except for getting scanned for documentation.
Amazing. Next question. Who would you say has been your biggest inspiration as an artist?
Wow. Well, as far as like career and like the kind of like world they've built, I'm really a fan of how Shepard Fairey has created his own world, because he came up as like a street artist, but now he has a graphic design studio, Studio One, attached to a gallery named Subliminal Projects, and he also operates his clothing brand. And whether or not you're a fan, it's just there's no denying that he has built this kind of creative empire. And I see myself kind of doing something similar where, you know, there's a design studio, a clothing company, and a gallery all kind of working in conjunction under the same roof.
I love that. I can't wait to see that because I feel like that'd be amazing, especially because all your work there. That'd be amazing. Do you find editing yourself or your work difficult, and how have you improved on that?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my work used to be very racy and erotic, and I've kind of like toned that down a little bit, I think, just for like clients and for like universal like embrace of my work. I tend to include like a lot of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll in my stuff, but kind of tone it down in like a kind of more like, you know, artsy, you know, more like design way. But like I really like dealing with like, you know, countercultural themes, but in like a sophisticated manner rather than so overt.
Amazing. Someone asked, I love this question. Have you made any NFTs for your work?
I have made a few NFTs. I have them listed on Foundation, and yeah, it's been really interesting being involved in that world. But there's a few works that I really am like, they're my favorite pieces, and those are the ones that I've chosen to mint. So there's still a few left on Foundation, and definitely like scheming up a larger like collectible project right now for release.
Amazing. Okay, so we have time for a couple more questions. So if anyone has any more questions, put them in the chat. Someone did ask in regards to collage art, what scanner or printer would you recommend? Do you use printed images in your collage pieces? Oh, these are two separate questions. Let's do the first question first. It's what scanner or printer would you recommend?
So my current scanner, I've honestly had it for probably like 6 years, but it's an Epson Perfection V550 photo, and it scans really good, scans film. I you know, I really love the quality, and I'll probably get the same one when it kind of like stops working. So I would definitely recommend that scanner. As for a printer, I only use like what is it? It is it Epson, but it's really just for like documents and like copying. So I definitely recommend that scanner, but for a printer, I would do some more research. And for the second question, do you use printed images in your collage pieces or only magazine cutouts? I use both. My X-Acto blade knows no boundaries. I will cut up magazines, books, photographs, Polaroids, anything if it kind of goes with the piece. Yeah, I think like mixed media is just, it's inherent in the name. It's whatever you can get your hands on, really.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Someone said, not a question, cannot wait for the drop tomorrow. Amazing. And on that note, I think that's all of the questions that we had from the audience. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to be able to talk to you and to kind of, you know, share your knowledge and your creative process and your journey throughout your wild and wonderful career. Yeah, good luck on your drop tomorrow. I'm sure everyone here will be tuning in tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you again, and thank you for everyone for tuning in and watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.
And I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Right. Peace.